The bill that we are debating today is a direct attack on the mission of this committee and on every American who depends on our public lands and resources for clean air, clean water, and a clean environment. This bill sells off our public lands in order to pay for $4.5 trillion in tax cuts for billionaires. Even as big oil posts record profits and production, Republicans want to give big oil another handout, courtesy of the American people. As we speak, millions of Americans are wondering how they can buy groceries, afford rent, pay for gas, and go to the doctor's office for a routine checkup in Trump's economy. This bill is not the answer to their questions. In fact, it makes them more fearful, and it's easy to understand why. Millions of Americans are in fear that Republicans will cut Medicaid, including the over 370,000 people in my district who rely on Medicaid for primary care. Republicans are doing nothing to lower the cost of living or protect Medicaid, nor are they doing anything to protect the air we breathe and the water that we drink. The bill Republicans are forcing through this committee saddles Americans' families with trillions more in debt and leaves current and future generations with a more polluted and expensive world, all while polluters can continue to operate unchecked. I have a series of amendments that will rein in polluters and champion environmental justice in communities like mine by protecting access to clean air, clean water, and a clean environment. My amendments will also protect access to affordable health care by forcing polluters to pay instead of collecting the giveaways Republicans want to give them. When we are finished voting at the end of this markup, the record will show that Democrats fought to protect communities across the country from Republicans' sale of our public lands and giveaways to big oil. We will continue to stand with the people and against this tax scam for polluters. Thank you, and I yield back. I'm extremely concerned about what this title means for environmental justice communities across America. This budget proposal puts Wall Street and big oil first and the most disadvantaged Americans last. It creates sacrifice zones where poor, Black, brown, and indigenous communities will be disproportionately saddled with more pollution and its disastrous effects while losing access to critical service like Medicaid and Social Security. Also, billionaires can continue lining their pockets. Communities across California, including in the Central Valley to the San Fernando Valley, know all too well what it means to live in a sacrifice zone. In Pacoima, where I lived and went to school, our air pollution is in the 96 to 100 percentile because of freeways that enclose fossil fuel pollution, the heavy presence of industrial usage, and the lack of public green spaces. As much as my colleagues will try to deny it, sacrifice zones like Pacoima exist across the country. But what are Republicans doing for Americans living in these sacrifice zones? They're making it easier for big oil to evade community consultation on extractive projects in our backyards. They're cutting Medicaid for millions of Americans, making it harder for people in sacrifice zones to receive health care and treatment as a result of big oil's unchecked and unregulated pollution. There are over 370,000 Medicaid beneficiaries in my district, including over 133,000 children. They all deserve to breathe clean air, drink clean water, and have accessible and affordable health care. Republicans are selling off our public lands to corporations with terrible environmental safety track records. They're increasing the already huge subsidies to the wealthiest polluters. And they're subjecting communities to additional greenhouse gas emissions that will create more and increasingly worse climate catastrophes in our communities. We must be putting the American people first, not billion-dollar corporations. I'm proposing an amendment to redirect revenues from oil and gas leasing programs to environmental justice communities to mitigate the pollution directly caused by this act. This seems like a fair trade to me. I urge all my colleagues to support my amendment, and I yield back. Since the beginning of this administration, the American people have been forced to watch an unelected billionaire direct a pseudo-government agency to wreak havoc across the federal government. What Elon Musk and Doge have done has been chaotic, cruel, and frequently illegal. While Elon Musk has been running Doge, firing thousands of dedicated public servants in charge of keeping our communities safe and wreaking havoc across the federal government, 2 of his companies received major government contracts from 17 of the federal agencies that he's gutting. Tesla received at least $352,000 in contracts, and SpaceX received a whopping $20.8 billion in federal government contracts. At the end of the previous administration, there were at least 20 investigations into Musk's companies by the very government agencies that he has kneecapped and shuttered. The corruption is out in the open and without any shame. These facts raise serious questions. Is Musk firing people en masse to create a climate of fear, which will result in the termination of investigations into his companies? Is he working to dissolve offices that enforce environmental protections from the devastating launches of SpaceX for his own financial benefit? Is he exerting improper influence to add to the billions of dollars in government contracts that he already has? While it certainly appears that way, we don't really know, especially since President Trump illegally fired the government's independent watchdogs. The offices of the Inspector General are the ones that we need to dig into each of these potential conflicts of interest. Only they can make informed decisions about whether we should keep shoveling the money that working families have earned into Musk's bottomless pockets. My amendment would require that no new federal contracts with Elon Musk's companies can be signed until the inspectors general of various departments determine whether Elon Musk broke the federal conflicts of interest law when he used the federal government to enrich himself. This should be an easy one to support for any member of Congress who cares about eliminating waste and rooting out corruption. I urge my colleagues to support my amendment, and I yield back. My amendment is very simple, making sure the communities most burdened by pollution, poverty, and underinvestment aren't erased from federal policy decisions. The Climate and Economic Justice Screening Tool was created to do just that. It used real publicly available data to identify disadvantaged communities facing the greatest environmental, health, and economic burdens. It made sure that those communities weren't overlooked when agencies distributed federal funds, which often favor the wealthiest communities that are better equipped to navigate the federal grant process. But as of January 22nd, the tool has vanished from the White House website. No explanation, no public process, just gone. When you eliminate one of the only tools we have to measure and track environmental justice, you're not just deleting a website, you're erasing people and the resources that they need to thrive. You're telling families in places like Pacoima, the Central Valley in California, Cancer Alley in Louisiana, and the Navajo Nation that their struggles don't count and that their communities don't deserve targeted investments in clean energy, health, or infrastructure. It's our duty to ensure that environmental justice communities across the country are not left behind in the fight against climate change, the fight for clean air and safe drinking water, and the fight for affordable energy. It's not just my district, but others in California as well, like those across the Central Valley and in Kern County, where communities have been sacrificed time after time so that big oil can line their pockets on the backs of marginalized communities. We cannot claim to care about equity or justice if we strip away the very tools designed to deliver it. I urge my colleagues to support my amendment, and I yield back.